Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Josh Gibson series, Negro League Matters. Thank you guys and women for attending us today. Looking forward to our great presentation today. I will let Ted introduce him in a few minutes, but again, we want to thank you guys for joining us. If you haven't been to our webinar series, this is our second one. This is webinar series part 2. These webinar series started back during the pandemic to keep the Negro League's history alive during the centennial year. And we're grateful and excited to keep continuing this on this great series. We are looking for speakers for next year's webinar part 3. We'll be kicking off in January of 2023. So if anyone is interested, please contact myself, Ted Noor, or Tom Kern to be one of our speakers for next year. As always, to register for for our future series, I should say, go to joshgibson.org and you can register for our next 2 series, which will be in June and July, and we're working on the rest of the months throughout the year. So with that being said, I'm going to turn over to my counterpart, Mr. Ted Noor, who's going to introduce today's speaker, and look forward to seeing this great presentation. And thanks again.
Thank you, Sean. This afternoon, I'm pleased to welcome and introduce my friend, Dom DeNaro. In 2004, I met Dom the hard way. I was on a trivia final on a panel of 3, and I was embarrassed by the wide gap between Dom's knowledge and mine. And even the great Dick Clark, who won that contest 9 times, finished second that day. So Dom knows his stuff. In addition to being a triviate, he co-authored a monograph with David Lawrence about the Eastern Colored League, which is a magnificent piece of work itself. And what could be better, it came with a companion APA baseball card set of the Eastern Colored League. Finally, he also authored a wonderful piece called A Centennial Field Scrapbook, which he may get some time to tell you about. It's about a ballpark up in Vermont where I believe he was living at the time. So that's all I have to say. Here's Dom.
Thanks, Ted. Thank you, Sean. Welcome, everybody. Bear with me while I fumble through sharing my screen. And we'll be underway in just a moment. All right. Today's presentation is going to be about the 1926 Negro League World Series. This was the 3rd edition of what was called at the time the Colored World Series, and deserves to be remembered as one of baseball's great championship series. There were 2 leagues in 1926. On the East Coast, the Eastern Colored League, in its 4th season, 8 teams, all in the Eastern Seaboard. Hilldale, based out of Philadelphia, was the champion of the league in its first 3 seasons, and the defending World Series champion coming into 26. Out in the Midwest was the Negro National League, founded by Rube Foster in 1920. The Kansas City Monarchs were the defending champions. The Monarchs and Chicago American Giants had won all the pennants in the 6 seasons of the league. Both leagues played a split season schedule with a playoff set up after the season, pitting the first half and second half champions to decide the World Series participants. In the East, the Backrack Giants out of Atlantic City won the first half. 13-game winning streak for manager Dick Lundy's club paced the team to that title, while the Kansas City Monarchs continued their domination and ran away with the first half pennant in the Negro National League. In July of that year, Rube Foster withdrew from baseball duties. He had nearly died of gas poisoning a year early, and his physical and mental health continued to decline. Just a few months later came the shocking news that Foster suffered a total mental collapse and would be institutionalized for the last 4 years of his life. Foster's longtime third baseman Dave Malarcher took over as manager of the American Giants and rallied the team to the second half title, forcing a playoff with the Kansas City Monarchs for the pennant. While the Backrack Giants in the ECL fought off some contenders to clinch the second half, and by winning both halves, didn't require a playoff and waited to see who they would face in the World Series. The Negro National League playoff between Kansas City and Chicago was a best 5 of 9 affair. The first 4 games were in Kansas City, and the Monarchs won all 3. When they took the first game in Chicago, they had a 4-1 lead in the series and were 1 win away from the pennant. But the American Giants took the next 2 to pull within 1 and set up a doubleheader the following day to determine the pennant. The first game of that doubleheader was a showdown between 2 Hall of Fame aces, Bullet Joe Rogan on the left for Kansas City and Willie Foster on the right for Chicago. If Chicago wins that game, there's a 5-inning second game to determine the pennant. Kansas City wins this first game, they're the champions. Either way, the victor boards a train to Atlantic City that night to face the Backracks in the World Series. That first game was a classic pitcher's duel, scoreless headed into the 9th. Leading off the bottom of the 9th, Chicago shortstop Sanford Jackson beat out an infield single. Pitcher Willie Foster bunted Jackson over to second. Then Joey Gardner struck out. There were 2 outs on the inning, but Sandy Thompson singled to left, driving in Jackson, winning the game for Chicago and forcing the 5-game winner-take-all, Game 9. Manager Rogan originally planned to start 19-year-old phenom Chet Brewer, who was 13-3 that season. But when he saw Foster warming up for Chicago, Rogan couldn't resist putting himself in the lineup for a rematch of their great first game. It didn't work out so well for Rogan and the Monarchs. Foster threw a two-hit shutout, bringing his shutout streak for the day to 14 innings. The American Giants won 4 straight elimination games to claim the title. Chicago's comeback kind of surprised the Pittsburgh Courier, who ran an ad advertising the World Series between the Backracks and Kansas City Monarchs, when in fact it was the Chicago American Giants who were going to play the Backracks in the series. Let's take a look at these 2 teams now. The Backrack Giants had been playing in Atlantic City since 1917. The team moved, a team called the Duval Giants moved from Jacksonville, Florida to Atlantic City. The Backracks quickly became a top team in the East and were charter members of the Eastern Colored League. In their typical lineup during the series, leading off first base, left fielder Ambrose Reed, speedy leadoff man, was a Backrack regular for most of the 20s. 34-year-old Napoleon Chance Cummings, nicknamed Chance after a similarity to the Cubs' great first baseman Frank Chance, an original Backrack in 1916, had played with the team in Jacksonville before moving to New Jersey. The number 3 hitter was third baseman Oliver Ghost Marcel, a Creole from just outside of New Orleans. In 1952, the Pittsburgh Courier poll selected Oliver Marcel the greatest third baseman in Negro League history. Cleanup man was Cheney Reindeer White, blazing speed, fiery competitor, the career Eastern Colored League leader in runs scored. Batting 5th modestly was the manager, Dick Lundy, the best hitter on the team, the best player all around on the team, a switch hitter who put up eye-popping offensive numbers, as well as a quick and graceful shortstop. Lundy was the career Eastern Colored League career RBI leader, no doubt a lot of those coming driving in Cheney White. Batting 6th was a large lefty named Luther Farrell, a pitcher outfielder for most of his career, but he pitched very little in 26 and not at all in the World Series, but he was the Backracks' regular right fielder. Farrell was the only real home run threat on either team in this series. Batting 7th, the 5'6" catcher Wee Willie Jones. The 8th hitter was the 5'3" Cuban second baseman Chano Garcia, for whom there are no known photographs. On the bench, the backracks featured Elias Country Brown, a fixture in Eastern blackball in the 20s, known as much for his comedic, clowning entertainment aspects of his game as his actual play on the field. And the backup catcher was Sleepy Joe Lewis, the longtime backrack to Biz Mackey at Hilldale, a veteran of the 1924 World Series. 26 was his only season with the backrack Giants. The ace of the pitching staff was Arthur Chauncey Rats Henderson, a stocky, hard-throwing right-hander with a terrific sidearm curve. Rats Henderson was the second best pitcher in Eastern Colored League history after Nip Winters. And here in 26, we're looking at an ace pitcher at the peak of his powers. The number 2 starter was a 22-year-old lefty flamethrower, Claude Red Greer. You'll notice this over 7 strikeouts per 9 innings, the best strikeout percentage in the Eastern Colored League in 26. He walked a lot, he struck out a lot, he threw very hard. The number 3 starter was Hubert Lockhart, a college star at Talladega, solid starter with the backracks for 6 years, later coached college baseball. Sidearm pitcher Alonzo Mitchell also played the outfield, where he put up some gaudy batting numbers in part-time service. The 21-year-old would play into his 40s, mostly with Southern-based teams. The 5th starter was Roy Ever-Ready Roberts, a veteran hurler. The Chicago American Giants were christened in 1911, 1 year after Rube Foster took control of the Leland Giants. And this was the premier Black team in the West through the 10s and 20s. They won the first 3 Negro National League pennants, but as I said, this will be their first appearance in the Negro World Series. The leadoff hitter, Floyd Jelly Gardner, was the American Giants' leadoff man for a decade. Punch hitter, drew a lot of walks, fast, smart, and aggressive. Defensively, an outstanding outfielder. The defensive metrics at the Scene Heads database rank Jelly Gardner in the 99th percentile defensively of center fielders all time. The manager batted second, Gentleman Dave Malarcher. He broke in 1916 with C.I. Taylor's Indianapolis ABCs, and like so many others, graduated to Rube's American Giants, became Rube's lieutenant and eventually his successor as manager. On the field, Malarcher was the classic number 2 hitter. Texan James Sandy Thompson split the majority of his 12-year career between the American Giants and Birmingham Black Barons, provided a strong left-handed bat in the middle of the order. John Hines was a solid hitter who split his time between catcher and outfield. And if I could read something from James Riley's biographical encyclopedia, quote, while drinking with teammate James Bray, a fight erupted between the two, resulting in Bray being killed and Hines being sentenced to life imprisonment at the Illinois State Penitentiary at Joliet. I believe that would have happened in 1931, 5 years later. Number 5 hitter was the versatile George Sweat, who could play all 3 outfield positions, plus first, second, and third base. He'd been a regular with the Kansas City Monarchs in the 24 and 25 World Series, was traded to the American Giants for Cristobal Torriente before the 26 season, and would play for Chicago in the 26 and 27 series, making him one of 2 men who played in all 4 of the first incarnation of the Negro World Series. Number 6 hitter was first baseman Jim Brown, the American Giants' regular catcher the previous 6 years, making a late career transition to first. He was a switch hitter, well-versed in the small ball arts synonymous with the Chicago American Giants. Batting 7, Sanford Jackson, a fast but weak-hitting shortstop from New Orleans. And batting 8, second baseman Charlie Williams, another speedy but weak-hitting middle infielder. The American Giants used no bench players during the World Series, just these 8 regulars and their pitchers. Occasionally a pitcher would pinch hit for another pitcher. The ace of the staff was the great Willie Foster, half-brother of Rube. There were 25 years between the two. He's 22 years old in 1926, and this is his breakout season. Foster ranks second all-time overall in black ball wins behind Smokey Joe Williams, first in wins in the Negro leagues, ninth all-time in earned run average, and is quite likely the best black ball left-handed pitcher ever. The number 2 starter was Reuben King Curry, a 27-year-old right-handed curveballer who was an important pitcher on 4 straight pennant winners. He'd been with Hilldale in 1924 and 25, and now the American Giants in 26 and 27, joining George Sweat as the 2 men playing in all 4 of the first incarnation of the Negro World Series. Willie Pee Wee Powell, just 5'8", 153 pounds, a solid starter with the American Giants and Detroit Stars in the late 20s and early 30s, just 22 years old. 36-year-old George Harney was a spitball and cutball artist. And Webster McDonald was a submarine pitcher known as 57 varieties for all of the different curves and spins and changes of velocity and variety of pitches he could throw. McDonald would later manage the Philadelphia Stars to a Negro National League pennant in 1934. Sam Crawford, 34 years old, had been an American Giant since 1913. He would play 1 game during the 26th season as an outfielder and pitch 1 inning in relief in the World Series. There's one more player, American Giant player I want to mention who didn't appear in the series. Pythias Russ, 22 years old, was their regular catcher during the 26th season. And he's one of way too many tragic what-if stories in black ball history. If you go to Seam Heads and run the similarity scores for Pythias Russ, identifying the major league players statistically most similar, you get the names Buster Posey, Archie Vaughn, Hannes Wagner, Joe Cronin, and Derek Jeter. Obviously a phenomenal player. As I say, here he's 22 years old, a catcher, would move to shortstop the next season, tragically died of tuberculosis at age 26, only played 5 years in Negro League ball. In 1925, Pythias Russ left the team late in the season to attend classes at Meharry Medical College in Nashville. I suspect the same thing happened in 26, but I haven't been able to identify it. In any case, he was not around for the playoff against Kansas City or the World Series. Let's take a look now at how these teams won their games. These are the 8 Negro League teams in either league who finished over 500 in the 26th season. You might call it the first division of Negro League baseball that year. And they're ranked here by runs scored per game, and you see the American Giants right at the bottom and the Backracks barely above them. But in runs against per game, Chicago clearly the best pitching staff in black ball, and the Backracks thoroughly up amongst the leaders. 1926 was in the middle of the Ruthian Revolution that dramatically changed baseball, but for a revolution, it took place gradually, pretty much on a team-by-team basis. Teams like Harrisburg, Detroit, and St. Louis Stars were ahead of the curve as far as their style of play, while the American Giants and Backrack Giants in particular clung to the old dead ball style of ball, and you'll see that type of baseball dominate throughout this series. With all that context behind us, let's proceed with the 1926 Negro League World Series. Series opened in Atlantic City, game 1 on a Friday afternoon at Backrack Park. Rube Curry pitching for Chicago, the ace Rats Henderson on the mound for the Backracks. I'd like to think of the brand of baseball played in this series as the opposite of 3 true outcomes. In the first run of the series, scored in the top of the second in an inning that featured an infield single, a stolen base, a bunt, a couple of errors, and a runner thrown out at the plate. In this first game alone, there was one bunt single, 6 sacrifice bunts, plus one batter safe on an error bunting, one stolen base, one caught stealing, 2 runners picked off second, and a third safe on an error, and 4 runners thrown out at the plate. And as I say, this is the style of baseball we'll see throughout this World Series. With the American Giants leading 3-2 in the home 7th, Luther Farrell tied the game with a home run to right. It would be the only homer hit in the series by either club. The key moment in the game occurred in the last of the 8th, with the score knotted at 3. A single, hit batsman, and bunt put runners on second and third with 2 outs and Dick Lundy at the plate. Rube Curry intentionally walked Lundy to load the bases. Home run hero Luther Farrell stepped up to hit. Manager Malarcher called staff ace Willie Foster out of the bullpen to pitch to the left-handed hitting Farrell, and Foster struck out Farrell to end the Backrack's threat. The game would be called after 9 innings due to darkness, a 3-3 tie. Saturday, game 2 in Atlantic City, an interesting pitching matchup. 36-year-old spitball cutball artist George Harney against 22-year-old flamethrower Claude Red Greer. And Greer was roughed up for 7 runs in the second. The big hit for Chicago was a bases loaded triple by catcher John Hines. But the Backracks came back, scoring 2 in the third and 2 more in the 6th to pull within 2. Still batting in the 6th, they had the bases loaded with just 1 out. Ambrose Reed is the batter. Reliever Webster McDonald recently entered the game for Chicago. Reed singled to right. Willie Jones scoring from third. The lead cut to 7-6. Right fielder Jelly Gardner threw home to catcher Hines. Chano Garcia, who was headed home, retreated to third, where he found teammate Hubert Lockhart. Lockhart returned to second, where he was thrown out, Hines to Sanford Jackson. Garcia tried to score, and he was thrown out at the plate, Jackson to Hines. Ambrose Reed's bases-loaded single turned into an inning-ending 9-2-6-2 double play, and Chicago still led by 1. Webster McDonald threw 3 more shutout innings to preserve Chicago's 7-6 win. After the 2 games in Atlantic City, the eastern portion of the World Series hit the road. Sunday baseball was still illegal in Pennsylvania in 1926, and Black teams at the time couldn't get any decent bookings in New York City. So the Sunday game went to Baltimore and Maryland Baseball Park, home of the Baltimore Black Sox. The surprise starters were 2 men who'd pitched the day before. Webster McDonald, who threw 3 2/3 innings of relief in game 2, and Claude Greer, who was roughed up for 7 earned in an inning and 2/3. To open the home first, Reed reached on Jackson's error, Cummings and Marcel singled, Malarcher aired on White's bunt, and Dick Lundy ripped a 2 RBI single to give the Backracks a 4-0 lead before an out had been recorded. The American Giants threatened in the 5th, loading the bases on an error and 2 walks, but Sandy Thompson grounded out to end the inning. Red Greer struck out Hines and Sweat to end the 6th. His pitching line through 6, no hits, no runs, 5 walks, 6 strikeouts. We can only imagine what the pitch count was. Greer doubled in Atlantic City's 6-run 6th inning that featured Dick Lundy stealing home on the back end of a double steal. Sanford Jackson reached on an error in the 7th, and Jelly Gardner led off the 8th with a walk, but there were still no Chicago hits off Claude Greer. In the 9th, Sweat grounded out to short, Malarcher grounded out to third, and Jackson grounded out to second to complete the no-hitter. 30 years before Don Larson's famous perfect game, Claude "Red" Greer throws the first World Series no-hitter. He walked 6 and struck out 8. Greer and Chance Cummings each had 3 hits for the Backracks. 2,859 were in attendance to watch history. Monday, the series moved to the Baker Bowl in Philadelphia, home of the Phillies. And this game 4 would be the much anticipated meeting of staff aces Willie Foster and Rats Henderson. The American Giants jumped out to a 3-0 lead. George Sweat drove in 1 run with a single in the first and scored another after doubling in the fourth. Sanford Jackson's error on Marcel's grounder in the 5th opened the door to a Backrack rally that gave the New Jerseyites a 4-3 lead. Chano Garcia led off the 6th with a triple, but was thrown out at the plate by Jelly Gardner on Henderson's fly ball to right. And Chicago would tie the game in the 7th with some classic Rube Foster style small ball. Sanford Jackson led off the inning with a bunt single to pitcher Rats Henderson. Charlie Williams followed with another bunt single past the pitcher. Willie Foster also bunted to Henderson, a successful sacrifice that moved the runners over. Jackson then scored the tying run on a passed ball by catcher Willie Jones. And the game would be called due to darkness after 9 innings, the second tie of the series. All 4 runs charged to Willie Foster were unearned. The series was supposed to move west after 4 games, but they decided they would stay in the East to replay the 2 ties. So Tuesday, they were back at the Baker Bowl, Rube Curry against the Backrack's Alonzo Mitchell. Chicago scored 3 runs in the first without a hit, as 3 Backrack infielders, Chance Cummings, Dick Lundy, and Chano Garcia, all committed errors. But the Backracks exploded for 6 runs on 7 hits and 2 errors in the 5th. The big blow was a triple by pitcher Alonzo Mitchell. Mitchell was also a star on the mound, holding Chicago to just 4 hits in a complete game win. Only 2 of the American Giants' 5 runs were earned. Lundy and Alonzo Mitchell each had 3 hits for the Backracks. On Wednesday, the teams returned to Atlantic City to play a makeup of the Game 1 tie. Another face-off between the spitballer and the flamethrower, Willie Powell and Claude Greer. For the second time in the series, Chicago started an inning with 2 bunt singles and a sacrifice. George Sweat followed with a 2 RBI single to tie the game in the 4th. But the Backrack Giants tallied single runs in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th to seal the victory. Backrack's leadoff hitter Ambrose Reed had 4 hits, including a triple, scored twice, and drove in 2. Claude Greer took his series record to 2-1 with the complete game victory. And then there were 2 days off for the teams to travel to Chicago for the duration of the series. The Backracks lead the series now 3-1 plus the 2 ties. Chicago's Shoreling Park, home of the American Giants, would host the rest of the series. Game 7 on a Saturday sees Hubert Lockhart locking horns with Willie Foster. The American Giants took a 4-1 lead in the 5th on Jelly Gardner's single, Dave Malarcher's walk, Sandy Thompson's double, and a triple by George Sweat. Cheney White tripled in the 8th to drive in Oliver Marcel, then scored on pinch hitter Joe Lewis's sac fly to tie the game 4-4. With the game still tied with 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, Dave Malarcher singled through the right side of the infield. With Sandy Thompson batting, Malarcher stole second, putting the winning run in scoring position. Backrack's manager Lundy summoned staff ace Rats Henderson from the bullpen to stifle the threat, and Henderson struck out Thompson for the 2nd out. With John Hines at the plate, a passed ball by catcher Willie Jones allowed Malarcher to move to 3rd. and Hines then singled to right, bringing home Malarcher for the walk-off victory. American Giants win 5-4. Willie Foster went the distance for Chicago. Sunday, game 8, back at Shoreland Park, Rats Henderson on the mound against George Harney. And the two starters, Henderson and Harney, were brilliant, each throwing shutouts through 7 innings. Jelly Gardner's 2-out bunt single in the 6th was the American Giants' first hit off Henderson. Atlantic City took the lead in the 8th when left fielder Sandy Thompson misplayed Cheney White's bases loaded single, allowing all 3 runners to score. And Rats Henderson threw a 3-hit shutout to earn the Backracks the win that, as the headline says there, put the Backracks 1 win away from the World Series title. Chicago will have to win 3 straight to deprive Atlantic City of the crown. Game 9 on Monday, Claude Greer against Rube Curry. American Giants jump out to a 3-0 lead. Shortstop Sanford Jackson hit an RBI triple in the 2nd and an RBI single in the 4th. He also scored a run. The bottom of the 6th was a bad inning for Backracks catcher Willie Jones. 1 run scored on his error on a play at the plate, another scored on a back pass ball. 3 runs total in the inning, 6-0 Chicago. American Giants starter Rube Curry finished a 1-2-3 7th by striking out Cheney White looking. 3 Backrack bench players, Roy Roberts, Joe Lewis, and Country Brown, were ejected for arguing the strike call. The Backracks had reason to be frustrated. Curry's pitching line threw 7, 2 hits, no runs, no walks, 7 strikeouts. But the Backracks started the 8th with 4 straight hits and 3 runs, but the alley ended when right fielder John Hines threw Chano Garcia out at the plate. And no-hit hero Claude Greer's record fall in the series falls to 2-2 with Chicago's 6-3 win. The attendance that Tuesday was only 905. Monday afternoon was just 905. It rained on Tuesday, so game 10 took place on Wednesday. Backracks still 1 win away from the series, and ace Rats Henderson on the mound against Willie Powell. Bottom of the 4th, bases loaded, 2 outs. No score, pitcher Willie Powell at the plate. Powell hit a ground ball to first that Chance Cummings misplayed for an error on what should have been the 3rd out. The next 4 batters hit safely as the American Giants tallied 7 unearned runs and knocked Backracks ace Rats Henderson out of the game. Chicago added 4 in the 5th and 2 more in the 6th to cruise to a 13-0 win. Willie Powell threw a crisp 6-hit shutout. The American Giants 1-2-3 hitters, Gardner, Malarcher, and Thompson, combined for 11 RBIs. The attendance was just 733. Incredibly, the American Giants tied the series and forced a decisive winner-take-all game 11. That game, Thursday, October 14th at Shorley Park, pitchers Hubert Lockhart and Willie Foster engaged in a classic reminiscent of the Jack Morris, John Smoltz Game 7 in the 1991 World Series. Top of the 1st, with 2 out and Lundy and White singled, Lewis walked to load the bases, but Willie Foster fanned Cummings to end the threat. And other than that, the bats were quiet through 6, Lockhart allowing only 2 hits. Top of the 7th, another 2-out rally for the Backrack Giants. Country Brown and Oliver Marcel stroked back-to-back singles. Willie Foster intentionally walked the dangerous Dick Lundy, loading the bases. But cleanup hitter Cheney White flew out to Jelly Gardner in center to end the threat. Top of the 9th, the Backracks put men on 1st and 3rd with 2 outs and Dick Lundy coming up. This time, Foster decides to pitch to Lundy and gets him to hit a grounder to short to squelch another Backracks threat. Excuse me. Bottom of the 9th. Jelly Gardner led off with a single to left. It's just the 3rd hit of the afternoon for Chicago. Dave Malarcher bunted Gardner to second. It's the American Giants' 15th successful sacrifice of the series. Then Sandy Thompson singled to center, driving home Gardner with the championship winning run. In a pair of legendary games 2 weeks apart, this Game 11 of the World Series and Game 8 of the League Championship Series against the Monarchs, Willie Foster threw a shutout and Sandy Thompson won a 1-0 game with a 9th inning walk-off single. The American Giants win the Negro League World Series 5-4 plus 2 ties. They won 3 straight elimination games to beat Atlantic City after winning 4 straight elimination games against Kansas City to take the pennant. The American Giants won despite a team batting average of .212 in the series, 59 points lower than Atlantic City. The American Giants hit no home runs in the series, but befitting the last team Rube Foster built, they did a bunch of the little things right. They drew 14 more walks than the Backracks, committed 8 fewer errors, turned 4 more double plays, had 6 outfield assists in 11 games, 4 by Jelly Gardner, and most importantly, won all 3 one-run games in the series, and that was the difference. The leading hitter in the series was Backracks Ambrose Reed, who topped all regulars in the 4 modern slash line statistics. Most notable achievement was Claude Greer's no-hitter, but Greer actually had a rough series with a 4.55 ERA throughout, though he did strike out nearly a man per inning. At the plate, he went 4 for 7 and had an OPS of 1.557 in the series. The 1926 World Series was the high point of Claude Greer's brief career. He would suffer from a dead arm in 1927 and be finished with Major League Ball by age 24. The other series leaders, Chance Cummings had the most hits. Dave Malarcher led in runs scored. A trio of American Giants, Hines, Jackson, and Thompson led in RBIs. Catcher Wee Willie Jones led in doubles, and catcher John Hines led in triples. Luther Farrell hit the only home run in the series. Malarcher and Lundy led in stolen bases. And Jelly Gardner, the American Giants leadoff man, walked 12 times in 11 games, which is something you like to see from your leadoff man. My choice for the MVP of the series is Willie Foster. Went 2-0 with a 1.27, started 3 games and a relief appearance. The Backracks hit .245 against Foster and .282 against the rest of the Chicago staff. Foster, of course, threw the epic Game 11 shutout to win the series. He also had that relief appearance in Game 1 where he got out of a jam and preserved a tie. If you combine that with the doubleheader shutout of Kansas City to win the pennant, Willie Foster joins Mathewson, Koufax, Gibson, and Bumgardner for the greatest postseason pitching performances of all time. The hard luck hero in the series was Hubert Lockhart, the man who dueled with Foster in Game 11. He went 0-2 in the series despite a 1.88 ERA and a batting average against of .205. Total attendance for the 11 games was 22,369, a little over 2,000 a game. The 2 weekday games in Chicago failed to draw 1,000 fans. In contrast, the 1926 Major League Baseball World Series between the Yankees and Cardinals averaged over double the total attendance of the Negro League Series. That's average per game. And perhaps that helps explain this discrepancy. These are the 15 participants in that 26th Major League World Series who are enshrined in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And admittedly, you have some of the greatest names in the game's history, Ruth and Gehrig and Hornsby and Alexander. But you also have a bunch of other names that seem a little less than immortal. And here's the list of Hall of Famers from the 1926 Negro League World Series. Willie Foster. And somebody please explain to me why Chick Hafey and Jesse Haynes and Earl Combs and Herb Pennock are Hall of Famers, but Dick Lundy isn't. Among my sources for this presentation, James Overmeyer's History of the Backrack Giants, Neil Langtote's History of the Hilldale Club, two invaluable reference works, Clark and Lester's Negro League book and Jim Riley's biographical encyclopedia. The statistics came from the database at seamheads.com, the clippings from my invaluable subscription to newspapers.com, and the World Series play-by-plays can be found at retrosheet.org. And with that, I thank you all for listening and turn things over to questions.
Okay. I hope I'm unmuted. I can see that I am. Wonderful presentation. Marvelous. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, Tom. The depth of some of the detail that you presented was amazing. So two questions. When and how did you first discover the Negro Leagues? And two, what resources, books, periodicals, newspapers, interviews did you use to develop such a knowledge base?
Well, I first became aware of the Negro Leagues. I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I was with my mother at some Nassau County, New York, or town of Hempstead, New York government building where she had to do some sort of thing, and found they had, you know, the presentation of pamphlets and little booklets, freebies that you could pick up. And there was a tiny little booklet of African-American sports heroes. And reading about that, I suddenly started seeing these Homestead Grays and Kansas City Monarchs and had no idea what these teams were, and was fascinated. So sometime after that, I probably read Only the Ball Was White, and it took off from there. I was, as someone who grew up, I mean, I became aware of baseball the year the Macmillan Encyclopedia came out. So I thought that when I held that book, I held the totality of baseball history in my hands, and it was sealed and locked in that one volume. And finding out that there was this whole other world that wasn't anywhere in that book, but was just as legitimately Major League, was exciting and thrilled me. It really took off the first time I sat down in front of a microfilm machine and looked at newspapers, the Pittsburgh Courier, it would have been, the sports pages of the Pittsburgh Courier from random moments in the 1930s. And suddenly that mystery world that was just, you know, vague and fictitious out in the corner somewhere burst into life. And I still, to this day, get a thrill looking through the old newspapers and finding the in-the-moment, on-the-scene recording of what went on. And so much of the detail in this presentation comes from those sources.
And just to comment on that, which is sad for all of us in today's world, the newspapers, black and white, in those days were much better prose. The box scores may be more informative today, but the articles back then were much better.
And
okay, here's a question.
In the box scores today, all of the columns add up, and balance, which is helpful as well.
That's true. Nick Frankert asked, first he says, great presentation, Dom.
Thanks, Nick.
And then he says, where else can you find nicknames like Jelly and Rats, but in the Negro Leagues? Now,
Absolutely.
Any idea the origin of those two nicknames?
Not at all. Actually, Rats, yes. I came across something where Rats Henderson picked up that nickname when he was a schoolboy, when he opened his lunch box and there was a rat in it and eating his lunch. Oh. And for the rest of his life, he was Rats. Jelly, I have no idea.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I hope we're still here. I have another question. In your opinion, Dom, which league was better, the Negro National or the Eastern Colored League?
Um, I'll vote for the Eastern Colored League. Simply because, for the simple reason that the Eastern Colored League could pay more. If you remember those first two maps I showed you, the Negro National League was spread out all throughout the Midwest. The East, you could fit the entire Eastern Colored League in the distance between Chicago and Indianapolis. As a result, the transportation costs there was incredible disparity in the transportation costs. Then you've got bigger markets in the East as well. And that combination gave them more power in the pocketbook, and they were able to lure the better of the players, in my opinion, at least.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. The presentation was marvelous. I'm hoping we get a couple more. Anybody with some last questions for Dom? Any fast typers out there? Okay, this is from Leslie. Look forward to, and let me take this opportunity. I look forward to seeing you in person, Leslie, in about a couple of weeks in Birmingham. Anyone who's not registered, there's plenty of time left. The greatest show on earth is going to meet for the 22nd time, June 2nd through 4th in Birmingham, Alabama. And my email is papabell@aol.com if anyone needs some help. But here's the question from Leslie. Who is your favorite Negro Leaguer?
Probably Dave Malarcher. The thoughtfulness of the man. The man was a scholar and a poet. And just on a personal level, he appeals to me more. Plus him being that C.I. Taylor, Rube Foster link just excites me. And on a personal note, Dave Malarcher and I share a birthday.
Great. Leslie compliments you on your choice. That's someone you don't hear much about. Anything else here? Okay, here comes another. This is from Gary Grow. He thanks you, and he says, just to quote my old friend David Malarcher, now I say in all modesty that I was the one man with the mental training to observe the effect of managerial as these managers demonstrated. Not sure can you help me there, Gary?
Now I say in all modesty.
You understand that question?
Yeah, well, I don't see a question there, but I do enjoy Malarcher modestly saying that he was the only one with the mental capacity to. And he's probably right. I mean, is it modesty if he's telling the truth? He apparently, by all accounts and everything I can tell, Dave Malarcher had a brilliant mind. And learning at the feet of two of the masters of blackball, he absorbed, I've always felt that the greatest tragedy of blackball integration was that they integrated players, but managers and coaches were not integrated. And as a firm believer of managerial trees, there were these trees going from C.I. Taylor and Rube Foster down through the rest of Negro League history, and then it just stopped. And it's akin to one of those ancient libraries being destroyed or pillaged or something. All of that knowledge and wisdom just vanished. And Dave Malarcher kind of embodies that for me, I suppose.
And the last questioner, Gary Grow, points out that Malarcher not only learned from Taylor and Foster, but also Charlie Stevens in New Orleans.
I'm not real familiar with Charlie Stevens. So
I'm going to be scurrying to my books, looking him up myself.
And I see Leslie asked, an overlooked player people should know more about. Oh, Leslie, there's a whole class of them. I feel like the Hall of Fame class of players has entered the mainstream consciousness now. And there is this whole level of what we might call all-star players who are completely anonymous. Dave Malarcher among them. Shady White, to pick one from this, Rats Henderson, Nip Winters to go to the rest of the Eastern Colored League. I mean, all of those guys who are just a notch below Hall of Famers, maybe their star didn't shine as brightly for as long or something. But those ball players fascinate me. Slim Jones, you want somebody who should be better known. You know, the Dwight Gooden and Vida Blue of his day. And unfortunately, things were a bit rougher in 1930s, I guess, but I digress.
Any other questions? Oh. And thank you, Dom, for finding Leslie's nugget there, because I had missed that question, but I'm glad we didn't miss your answer.
Well, I've been print screening the comments so I can look them all over later when I relax.
Okay. Anything more for Dom? Well, thank you very much, Mr. DeNaro. You certainly raised the bar for my friend Phil Dixon next month.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure doing this. I appreciate the opportunity. Sean, you're muted.
Thanks, Dom. Great presentation. Thanks for the great questions for all the guests that was on today. Yeah, it was great. So as Ted just mentioned, our next speaker for next month will be the great Phil Dixon on Buck O'Neill, June 11th of next month. And then for July, we have Roberta Newman for July. So you can go to joshgibson.org to pre-register for those 2 dates. But again, Phil Dixon will be on board for June 11th, our next presentation for June. So if there's no other questions, Dom, you stay on where everybody leave off just to wrap up. But again, thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Stay warm, stay safe. It's hot in Pittsburgh, so I don't know how the weather is anywhere else, but don't get too hot. But enjoy your weekend and have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.